everybody! Over the course of the past few weeks, we have talked about everything Mardu Greasefang. We've looked at card choices and overall strategy of the deck. We've looked at how to sideboard against the top 10 most popular decks in Piioneer. We have looked at flex slots and different ways to build the Mardu Greasefang deck. And we looked at nuances and weird play patterns that you need to know about when you play the deck. And so this video is a deep dive where we combine all of those things. Enjoy. So Mardu Greasefang is fully based around putting a vehicle, preferably Parhelion, but Sky Sovereign is fine as well, into the graveyard, and then casting Greasefang and going to combat. Now Greasefang is a 4/3 for 3 that says at the beginning of combat in your turn, return target vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield, it gains haste. Return to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Now when you do this with Parhelion, which again is the dream, you go to combat, Parhelion returns to the battlefield. Parhelion is flying first strike vigilance. Whenever Parhelion 2 attacks, create 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance that are attacking, and conveniently it has crew 4. So in beginning of combat, Parhelion returns to the battlefield. You use Greasefang or something else if you want to man it up, and then attack with Parhelion. It is 13 damage, and the 2 4/4 angels remain on the battlefield, and you get to keep your Greasefang. Parhelion returns to your hand, but that's like totally fine. That's the combo. That's what we're trying to do. You can do the same thing with Sky Sovereign, except it just deals effectively 6 damage to opponent's creatures, because 1 for entering, 1 for the attack, and then it returns to your hand. And then you can replay Sky Sovereign, which is kind of cool. It's more realistic to replay Sky Sovereign than replay Parhelion, but that's what we're trying to do here. So how do we do that? Well, we have a Mardu mid-range shell that just happens to discard a lot of cards to be able to put these Parhelion and Sky Sovereigns into our graveyard. Specifically, we're playing Fear of Missing Out. Fear of Missing Out is a 2-mana 2/3. When it enters, discard a card, then draw a card, so preferably discarding one of these vehicles. And when it attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, which is pretty easy to do because we have artifacts and enchantments and creatures and instants and sorceries, untap target creature. After this phase, it's an additional combat phase. That is disgusting with Parhelion and Greasefang. So like the nutty nut hand is like turn 1 Thoughtseize or Fatal Push your opponent's creature. Fear of Missing Out, discard Parhelion, you know, mill a bunch of cards with like Overlord or something like that, get Delirium, Greasefang, man up Parhelion, and then take 2 combat phases with Fear of Missing Out. So good. Bloodtithe Harvester is another just really good mid-range card, but also a discard outlet. It is a 2-mana 3/2 and enters, create a blood token where we can pay 1, discard a card, and draw a card, which again, that's what we're attempting to do. And we can sacrifice Bloodtithe Harvester to have a creature get -X/-X until end of turn, where X is twice the number of blood tokens you control, and we can activate only as a sorcery. Just very good by itself, but also it kind of goes along with our plan. Fable of Mirrorbreaker is another discard outlet. I'm gonna go through Fable of Mirrorbreaker, but if you play Pioneer, you know what this does. It's a 3-mana saga. First chapter is create a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token. Whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token. Its second chapter is discard up to 2 cards. You draw that many cards. So again, we're discarding. And third chapter is it turns into Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, which is a 2/2, where we can pay 1 and tap it to create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except it gains haste, sacrifice it, they begin in the next end step. And that can combo with, you know, Greasefang, with Bloodtithe Harvester, with Fear of Missing Out. We can even copy an Overlord. It's just very, 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 very good. But the big thing here is that this card is good by itself, and it discards cards so that we can get these vehicles into the graveyard, just like all of these cards. Now, the last card that we use to get vehicles into the graveyard is Overlord of the Baelmerk. It is a 5-mana 5/5. When Overlord of the Baelmerk enters or attacks, mill 4 cards. Then you may return a non-avatar creature card or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand, which means every creature but itself it can return. So it's a great way to get a Greasefang that had been killed before combat or something like that back to your hand. You can also mill a Greasefang and get it in your hand so that you can cast it. It also puts those great vehicles in the graveyard. It also has Impending for 2 mana, so you can cast it on turn 2, mill 4 cards, return a creature card, right? Any of these to your hand, and it's just excellent. So these are the combos, but again, notice besides this category, all of these cards are just like very good mid-range cards by themselves. So we're in a mid-range shell while we're threatening this really nasty combo. Now to support that mid-range strategy, we're playing Akroxa. Croxa is 2-mana 6/6. When it enters, sacrifice it unless it escaped. And when it enters or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. And we can escape it for 4 mana and exiling 5 other cards from your graveyard. Just a very good mid-range card if the game goes really long. We're playing 2 Vanishing Verse in the main deck. Exile target monocolored permanent. Vanishing Verse has gained a lot of stock recently. There's a lot of very scary monocolored permanents. Playing 1 Bitter Triumph, just being able to deal with the planeswalker or creature for effectively no cost is awesome. Torch the Tower is just a decent removal spell, being able to deal with small creatures or phoenixes like forever. We're playing 3 Fatal Push in the main deck, just as a 1 mana destroy creature with mana value 2 or less, or mana value 4 or less if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, which is reasonably easy between the treasures and the blood tokens and whatnot. And then 4 Thoughtseize. Obviously, if you're playing a mid-range deck that's playing black, you just have to play these Thoughtseize. 1 mana, target player reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card, and you lose 2 life. As far as the mana base goes, there's not a lot of interesting stuff going on. Playing an Elegant Parlor, and Elegant Parlor is kind of cute because we can, like, if we hit a vehicle off the Surveil, we can put it in the graveyard really easily. Also, Takanuma is actually, like, generally good in the deck. It effectively does a similar thing as Overlord of the Balemark. We can discard it from our hand to pay 4 mana and mill 3 cards and return a creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard to our hand. So just another way to get Greasefang back. But it's just Mardu lands. Not a lot of interesting stuff. We want things to enter untapped. As far as our sideboard goes, we're playing 2 Portable Holes for permanents we care about with mana value 2 or less. An Elish Norn to neuter those decks that have a lot of the battlefield abilities. So, like, what immediately pops in my head is like Leyline Binding decks. 3 Duress. I don't know why they're different arts. I apologize for that. For combo decks, control decks, anything that is a lot of the decks duressable. We're playing a single Fatal Push just to round out our playset against these decks that we can kill things with Fatal Push. A Braid is, a decent creature kill for 2 mana. Also, destroying artifacts is very powerful. We're finishing out a playset of Vanishing Verse for decks that's good against. Reckoner Bankbuster is against these decks that the game is going to go long, and we need to make sure that our mid-range plan is even better and we can drive in more cards. And we're playing 2 Unlicensed Hearse as our graveyard hate. So this is the Mardu Greasefang deck, by the way. If you want to have a better look at Mardu Greasefang, I posted a deck tech of this not that long ago. So I'm not going to talk about the deck as a whole. Instead, let's look exclusively at the sideboard. Portable Hole is for these decks that have a lot of non-land permanents, mana value 2 or less, so like aggro decks. It's good for like Rest in Peace, stuff like that. Elish Norn is great for decks that have a lot of enter the battlefield effects, so think like Enigmatic and whatnot. Dress, I'm sorry, they're different arts for some reason. Dress for these like control decks, or combo decks that we need to deal with. The 4th Fatal Push, mostly for aggressive decks. A Braid is really diverse and pretty cool card where, you can use it as removal or decent artifact hate. Vanishing Verse, again, against decks that have a lot of monocolored permanents. Vanishing Verse 3 and 4. Reckoner Bankbuster for decks that are going to go and like a really long time. And Unlicensed Hearse is our graveyard hate. So, the most popular deck in Piioneer is Rakdos Midrange. Against Rakdos Midrange, we're bringing in Vanishing Verse to deal with Shieldred and Archfiend and Fable and Unholy Hanex, and it deals with just so much stuff. We are bringing in Fatal Push just to be able to cleanly deal with the creatures. I'm a fan of Reckoner Bankbuster just in case the games go a little long. And we're going to be bringing out Thoughtseizes because we kind of have to play the mid-range game against this deck. And we just want a lot of high value cards if possible, and to be able to answer them 1 for 1 and all that stuff. And I'm going to shave a single Fear of Missing Out. It loots, which is nice, but we're likely not going to have a lot of creatures when we play against this deck because they're full of removal spells. So this is our sideboard against Rakdos. The second most popular deck is Izzet Phoenix. Against Izzet Phoenix, we're bringing in the 3 Duress, bringing in the Vanishing Verse because it deals with all of the creatures and deals with artist talent. Obviously, Unlicensed Hearse is great, being able to deal with the graveyard so they can't cast their treasure cruise and can't bring back art like Phoenix. We're going to be bringing out Fatal Push because it doesn't really cleanly deal with anything. A lot of the decks are getting off of Ledger Shredder, and even against the Ledger Shredder decks, it's pretty medium. We're going to take out Kroxa because often it can help their game plan. I'm not a fan of Sky Sovereign because it doesn't really do anything against this deck. And we're going to shave on Overlord because it can just end up being a little slow. So it's how I sideboard against Phoenix. The third most popular deck is Rakdos Prowess, Rakdos Aggro, whatever you want to call it. We're bringing in Portable Holes, obviously. We're bringing in Fatal Push. We're bringing in Abrade. We're bringing in Vanishing Verse, just all the removal you can possibly imagine. And we're going to be taking out cards that are slower or don't do anything right when they enter. So we're going to take out Croxa. We're going to take out Overlord. And then we're going to shave on Thoughtseizes. So this is how I sideboard against Rakdos Aggro. The fourth most popular deck is Selesnya Company. Against Selesnya Company, I'm a fan of Elishnorn because it can turn off Enduring Innocence and a couple of the removal spells and like Aven Interrupter and whatnot. We're going to bring in Fatal Push and Abrade and Vanishing Verse to be able to deal with their creatures. We're not bringing in Portable Hole because most of their creatures are 3 mana and you just can't reliably have it do anything. We're taking out Croxa because the games often don't go super duper long. Taking out Overlord for similar reasons. We need everything to do something when it's happening. And we're shaving on Fear of Missing Out. Whoops, took one too many. Start sideboard against Selesnya Company. The fifth most popular deck is Jund Sacrifice. Portable Hole is pretty decent against Jund Sacrifice, so we're bringing that in. Elishnorn is kind of cool. I've been liking it a lot in the matchup because it totally turns off the combo, and that's the big draw to Jund Sac at the moment. We're bringing in Abrade because it deals with Mayhem Devil and deals with the Witch's Oven, and Unlicensed Hearse to kind of stop the craziness with Scavenger's Talent and the cat and whatnot. Going to be bringing out Vanishing Verse. It doesn't really answer that many important things against the deck. We're going to be bringing out a lot of our removal because very often they can get value off of their removal. I'm going to keep Torch the Tower in because like hitting a Cauldron Familiar with a Torch is actually pretty powerful. And we're just going to shave on Fear of Missing Out. And there is your sideboard against Jund Sac. The sixth most popular deck in Piioneer that's been coming up the ranks recently, actually quite a bit, is Niv to Light. Against Niv to Light, we're bringing in Elishnorn because most things have entered the battlefield abilities. We're bringing in Duresses, very good against that deck. I'm a fan of Reckoner Bankbuster because the games can end up going pretty long. We're going to be bringing out Vanishing Verse, not a lot of monocolored permanents. Bringing out Torch the Tower and Fatal Push because it can't really hit much at all. And that's how I sideboard against Niv to Light. The seventh most popular deck is Blue-White Control. Against Blue-White Control, we're bringing in the Duresses, obviously. You always bring Duress against Blue-White Control. Bringing in the Reckoner Bankbusters. And we're going to be bringing out a bunch of removal. Shave on a Vanishing Verse. Bitter Triumph's a little bit better against Vanishing Verse because it can hit Teferi, but they're both like fine. So sideboard against Blue-White. The eighth most popular deck is Hidden Strings. Against the Hidden Strings deck, obviously we're bringing in the Duresses. I'm a fan of Unlicensed Hearse because it can turn off Leer, especially if you turn to it. And we're bringing out a bunch of removal. A lot of the removal straight up doesn't do anything like at all. Keeping some amount in is decent for like the Leer being able to hold it up, but that's how I sideboard against Lotus Field. The Mirror Match is the ninth most popular deck of the format. In the Mirror Match, we are bringing in Fatal Push, Abrade. Also a fan of Vanishing Verse. It can hit a Parhelion, fun fact. And obviously Unlicensed Hearse as additional graveyard hate. Bringing out Croxa because often it can help the opponent in the Mirror Match. And really, I'm just looking to set up like a really good mid-range plan and be reactive. So I'm not a big fan of Thoughtseizes. And we're just going to shave on Fear of Missing Out. Like we do a lot of the time. So that's how I sideboard in the mirror. The 10th most popular deck is the Enigmatic deck. Mostly the Zur version. Elishnorn is excellent against this deck. Duress is excellent against this deck. Vanishing Verse also excellent against this deck. We're gonna be shaving on we're gonna be cutting Torch the Tower. We're gonna be cutting Fatal Push because they just don't hit basically anything. Sky Sovereign also kind of doesn't do anything in the matchup, so it's how I sideboard against Enigmatic. So these are the cards you pretty much have to play if you're playing Mardu Greasefang. These 55 cards in the main deck and these 3 cards in the sideboard. So just on first glance, it's pretty obvious that the main deck has been pretty much figured out, but the sideboard has decidedly been not figured out at all. So what do you play in these 5 slots in the main deck and 3 cards in the sideboard? Well, any of these. So there are 10 options to play in those 5 slots in the main deck and 25 options to play in those 12 slots in the sideboard. And then you have your customized and personalized Mardu Greasefang deck while still being reasonably stock. So let's talk about why you would play each of these cards. Torch the Tower is very, very good against Phoenix, also good against these aggressive decks. Reckoner Bankbuster is sort of the exact opposite, is very good against the slower decks or decks that are very good at answering your combo so that you can lean more into the Mardu mid-range plan. Bitter Triumph is an excellent way to answer creatures and planeswalkers, and again leads a little bit further into the Mardu mid-range plan, just having more removal. Same thing with Vanishing Verse, though Vanishing Verse is extremely versatile, very good against the Xur deck, and can just snipe a lot of cards like Rest in Peace and whatnot that end up being extremely good against us. And Overlord of the Baelmerk leans a little bit more into our Parhelion Greasefang plan, allowing us to mill more, get Greasefangs out of our graveyard, and being a threat in and of itself. So you're going to be selecting 5 of these 10 cards to be played in the main deck. Now, as far as the sideboard goes, we have quite a few more decisions to make. So again, you're looking for 12 of these cards to join the 3 duress that are totally stock. 4 Portable Hole is excellent against these aggressive decks, is also very good against cards that are good against us, so like Unlicensed Hearse and Rest in Peace and whatnot. Kutziel's Flanker is just an all-around decent card. Great graveyard hate, decent against aggro because it can gain life and then block, and just generally good against board wipes as well, though that's a little bit corner case. Lorna the Third Path is an excellent way to answer artifact and enchantment hate, especially something that can be grabbed with Overlord. Elish Norn, very good against the Xur decks, and also surprisingly good in our own deck, being able to trigger our stuff twice. Cut Down just as an additional thing to join something like Torch the Tower or Portable Hole for the aggressive decks. Leyline of the Void is a really good way to answer other graveyard decks. I've already talked about Torch the Tower. Abrade is a little bit less narrow creature removal because it can also hit artifacts. I've already talked about Vanishing Verse and Reckoner Bankbuster, and Unlicensed Hearse is graveyard hate. Basically, if you want a late game threat and maybe want to devote less slots than playing Leyline of the Void for playing the graveyard hate. So in order to build your version of Mardu Greasefang, you're going to select 5 of these 10 cards to join your main deck and 12 of these 25 cards to join your sideboard, to join all of these cards, which are the stock version of the deck. So let's jump into it with Overlord being able to bring back Greasefang. One of the major reasons you play Overlord of the Baelmerk not only is to fill your graveyard with vehicles, but remember, it can grab, not FOMO, sure, but also Greasefang. So it's a way to get Greasefang out of the graveyard and a way to like search for and draw for Greasefang, so it makes your combo way more consistent. Speaking of FOMO, fear of missing out can get multiple attacks when you have Parhelion on the battlefield to effectively just win. If you have Delirium and you do the Parhelion combo, you can untap Parhelion and just win in the air that turn. You can also do a similar thing with Overlord of the Baelmerk to get multiple triggers off of Overlord and be able to attack with Overlord multiple times with FOMO. It turns out something that gives you multiple combat phases and untaps a creature is really good alongside things that have like attack triggers. And then the last thing that isn't super duper obvious that you can do is, remember, you can Thoughtseize yourself to get a vehicle in the graveyard to play a Greasefang in combo. Now remember, this kind of hemorrhages value because it means you're not Thoughtseizing your opponent, especially if Thoughtseize is in your deck, and it opens you up to being million for one by them being able to interact with the combo. So you got to make sure you do it when the coast is clear or you're desperate, but Thoughtseizing yourself is always an option. So remember that. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.